the like button, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to the next portion of this.
So there you have it. We've costed our meal program, 1 meal per student per day. The RIDE program providing a subsidy up to $2,500 per week for 20,000 students, and the First in Family scholarships, which would reach over 6,000 students, and we've costed all of that out.
Before the next Prime Minister continue, you see, I was watching a video from a young lady in Africa, and she said that we, the people of Africa, the government has to make agriculture attractive. So, you know how this beautiful young lady on the screen right now, look with her natural hair, smiling, clean with the produce and the presentation. This is good. This is good. The next level is what the Mr. Hubert Ryan Williams said, right? The farming in St. Thomas is going to be so attractive under him. A big bank. When they see the money start roll out in them bends, that's what makes agriculture attractive. Because you see the youths them now, if you're not show them, them not interested, So when you can show them, say, alright, Bridget, I'm a farmer, and you see what I'm driving? Yes, but the work is hard, but you see what I'm living? That, ladies and gentlemen, is going to encourage more farmers, you understand, and more young men to want to go into farming. And with the government looking to really give back to the people in terms of the allocation of lands and housing programs, trust me, it's all coming together, ladies and this is the government. I'm telling you, the plans that they have, it is really touching on everything, and I can see the vision. I don't know about anybody else, but I can see it. I can feel it. I can taste it. I cannot wait to have it. Alright, so let's make sure we're ready to vote, ladies and gentlemen. We only have 5 days to go. Let's continue.
The data that we have. I now move to agriculture. We have a proposal to establish an agricultural development fund, and we have looked at the average annual food import taxes levied, and we've applied a percentage to that, and we've arrived at a 2.5 billion annual amount, which is really from the existing tax base that we would specifically earmark for this agricultural development fund to give our farmers the support they need to be productive, to move forward. And that is within the envelope that we are able to fund, as I've said. I should mention that yesterday in Parliament, the government brought a bill to amend the GCT Act to remove GCT from food imports of fresh produce, vegetables and meats. And it was the intervention of the opposition that caused the government to suspend debate on that bill. And that, is important to note, because when that GCT is removed from those imports, any of those goods that compete with local domestic farmers are going to be have an advantage which they don't currently have now, and make life even harder for our farmers to survive. Next slide, please. Small business.
We can't just move past that. Thank God for the PMP. Mighty God of Daniel. Can you imagine if that bill was passed yesterday? It was premature, like the opposition leader said, soon to be the Prime Minister of Jamaica. It was premature, right? So thank God for them for being, sharp in raising the questions that he raised. You understand? Thank God for the future Prime Minister for being sharp, because that bill would not be helping our farmers. Mighty God, let's continue.
I'm going to ask Julian to speak to this.
Thank you very much. We proposed a waiver of corporate income tax for new MSMEs that are establishing for the first 3 years. And we propose that we have made an allocation of $1 billion for this. If we got data from the Companies Office of Jamaica to look at the number of MSMEs, a number of companies that are established each year, and that is in the region of about 5,000 new companies per year on average over the last 3 years. Now, not every single company is going to pay taxes initially in their first year or necessarily make a profit. But we made an assumption that, let's say, 60% of them would actually make a profit. Based on that, we have also done a calculation of what that profit would look like. And so the loss or the impact on the Treasury for offering that tax waiver for 1 year is $1 billion. Nowhere near the $11 billion that the minister has announced. And I want to remind the country.
Shame on you, Fayval. Shame on you.
Embarrassing. He needs some milk.
Shame on you, Fayval. What the general said? Yeah, man, they were very vigilant. Very vigilant. Shame on your, Fayval.
For offering that tax waiver for 1 year is $1 billion. Nowhere near the $11 billion that the minister has announced. And I want to remind the country why we're doing this. Jamaica has a very high level of informality in our business sector, mainly because businesses stay outside the formal system to avoid paying tax. We want them in the formal system because even though you're not paying corporate income tax, when you're in the formal system, you'll be contributing to GCT, you're employing people, your payroll tax. There are a number of other benefits to companies coming into that formal system. And we believe this incentive is important to encourage businesses, MSMEs, to come into the formal system. So based on our calculation, looking at the history of the compliance and also taking into account that businesses get a $375,000 income tax credit every single year. So if, for example, let me use a simple example. Let's say your profits are $5 million, right? Or 25%. No, your profits are $500,000. You pay 25% of that. That's $125,000. So you will already have a credit from the corporate income tax. So the figures presented by the minister are nowhere near accurate in terms of what that revenue give up would be.
Before I move to the next slide,
shame on Fayval.
One point on this issue. I just want to make one point. The minister clearly had a pro box moment.
Wait a sec. Wait a sec, bossy. Wait a sec. Hey.
That is funny, honey.
Hey, Marky cheese.
That's funny.
Oh my God.
That is funny.
Marky G said Fayval have a pro box moment. Hold on.
Can I just make one point on this issue? I just want to make one point. The minister clearly had a pro box moment on this issue because when she's projecting that the measure to give a 3-year tax holiday for newly formed MSMEs would cost over $11 billion per year. What that suggests is that the newly formed SMEs are making profits of over $40 billion a year. Now that's more than the profits of the entire financial sector. Come on, Minister.
Oh my God, no, Fayval. Oh.
Embarrassing. He needs some milk.
Yo, who set up Fayval Williams? Who wrote that speech? Yo, who put those numbers together? Is somebody sabotaging Fayval Williams? Bro, she couldn't be that off. 40 that she really say? Oh no, play that back. Oh.
To give a 3-year tax holiday for newly formed MSMEs would cost over a moment. Jules, can I just make one point on this issue? I just want to make one point. The minister clearly had a pro box moment on this issue because when she's projecting that the measure to give a 3-year tax. The minister clearly had a pro box moment on this issue because when she's projecting that the measure to give a 3-year tax holiday for newly formed MSMEs would cost over $11 billion per year. What that suggests is that the newly formed SMEs are making profits of over $40 billion a year.
No, what is key to note, to show you how our numbers is off, these are newly formed businesses. Now for a newly formed business to be making over $40 billion, Mighty God, 40 billion? newly formed businesses, SMEs, small businesses, collectively, is making the newly formed ones. That in itself shows you that that was off. That was way off. Fayval, oh my God, Fayval, no. No, Fayval.
Take his microphone.
Fayval, I'm
Just a
ushering
minute.
you out, Fayval.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Take his microphone.
Nah, Fayval.
Usher him out.
Nah, you gotta go.
Usher him
Yo,
out.
somebody take Fayval
Usher him
microphone.
out.
Anytime Fayval take the microphone in Parliament, somebody take our. No, this bad.
Now that's more than the profits of the entire financial sector. Is that the MSME, the new to give a 3-year tax holiday for newly formed MSMEs would cost over $11 billion per year. What that suggests is that the MSME, the newly formed SMEs are making profits of over $40 billion a year. Now that's more than the profits of the entire financial sector. Come on, Minister. Stop misleading the public. Yeah.
I want to go next to a sector that has provided
Cervix in women continues to claim so many lives of Jamaica's women. We will launch a national screening program to identify the diseases that are the top killers of Jamaicans and treat them early and more effectively. No, your name's a joke. Joking that. Prevention and early treatment are easier, cheaper, and more effective than late cures. They specialize in gimmicks. We specialize in real solutions to bring lasting change.
allow Jamaica to punch above its weight. We have said we're going to put aside $1 billion for a cultural and creative industry fund. We know that there's a fund for filmmakers, but there are so many other subsectors that are not accounted for. There are people who sing, there are people who dance, there are painters, there are musicians, there are artists, there are the full gamut. We have said we're going to provide this fund to enable them to grow their businesses. Many of them are in export-led businesses. They're providing a service, but they are creative, but they don't necessarily have the financial backing to expand the business in the way that we believe is important to facilitate export-led growth. So we are allocating $1 billion, and we're going to work with using the DBJ as the main entity to disburse the funds to facilitate the creation of business plans. We provide the technical assistance as well so that these individuals can grow. That's a commitment of our party. We have seen where our cultural icons have put Jamaica on the map, whether it is in sport, it's in music, and we are committed to supporting that sector even further.
No, I am very excited about that because that is speaking to the era that we are. That's speaking to the era that I am in and all of us that are YouTubers. You get what me I say? So I applaud that. I champion it and I'm happy about it. Let's continue.
Now the asset tax, again, I think this was a pro-box moment of the minister. But I want to explain the thinking behind the phasing out of the asset tax. I said three things in my budget presentation. First, that we would make access to government deposits competitive versus a system now where the two big banks get the majority of it. The second thing I said, I would phase out the asset tax over a 5-year period. Now, if you phase something out over a 5-year period, it means that each year you're taking 1/5 of that take each year. So the minister presented $8 billion yesterday that we would be giving back. In fact, the opposition leader stood on a point of order. We never said that. We said over 5 years, and we were deliberate. We knew that we could not absorb the entire amount of the asset tax in 1 year.
No, to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, I was listening to the budget and I heard when she said it, and I even remember when the man said they're gonna phase it out in 5 years. So I was like, wait a minute. Fayval, they're lying. Then I saw Mark Golden get up and say, point out. I said, thank God. Thank God. And then when Mark Golden, well, I think the first point of order that he made, you saw the JLP. They were acting like a bunch of animals. They were acting illiterate and dunce as a collective group that is supposed to be governing the country. It was so embarrassing. Even the Speaker of the House, she probably wanted to join in with them, but then she remembered that they were on national television. It was so, brother, it was so disgraceful, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling, and she was just blatantly lying in the bitchin'. You know, I try to find it back. I find back the clip.
1/5 of that take each year. So the minister presented $8 billion yesterday that we would be giving back. In fact, the opposition leader stood on a point of order. We never said that. We said over 5 years, and we were deliberate. We knew that we could not absorb the entire amount of the asset tax in 1 year. And what we have said, by phasing it out, it will make banks more competitive, and it will reduce the cost of banking services and fees to the customer. The government has done nothing about this in 9 years. It has done nothing about this. And we believe this is important for competitiveness in the banking and financial services industry, and also for individuals who go to ATMs, use their bank cards, and have to deal with the level of fees that they absorb. So this figure of 8 billion is a mystery to me. I can say it is only consistent with the Pro Box moment, where she believes that saving $2,000 a month for 3 years can make a deposit. It is fantasy, and it's actually ludicrous that a Minister of Finance could stand up in Parliament and make such a false and deliberately inaccurate and misleading statement. Yeah. She has said nothing about what the government plans to do to make the banking sector more competitive. In fact, when Fitz-Jackson brought the bill, we knew which side they stood on. They voted it down. We are committed to bringing back that bill and passing it, because you cannot have a sector in the country where, when every other sector is not doing well, only one sector is, which is banking and financial services. We have to make it more competitive and consistent with the other sectors and aligned with the other sectors.
Right.
That's a sound argument.
Okay.
Let's go to energy
Thank
now.
you, Julian. We move now to energy. The government has very late in the day finally acceded to something that we have been calling for a long time, which is to put some funding behind allowing families that currently are not lawful customers of the grid, of JPS, but want to become lawful so that they can have proof of address, so they're no longer at risk of being prosecuted, so that the fire risks inherent in having houses that are properly wired, all of that can be dealt with. They've allocated $1 billion in the budget for that. We have said we think that's insufficient, because that can only reach 20,000 households, and our estimation is that there are actually around 3,000 households that are not currently customers of JPS. We would start by adding another $1 billion to that exercise, and as fiscal space opens up, we will also look to ramp that up further. Next slide, please. So, if you add up all of the measures that we have proposed, which are charges on the budget, with all the slides we went through, the total for that is $22.6 billion. And if you round that up for conservative purposes, that's $23 billion. It's the aggregate cost of the budget of the measures that we have outlined. And that is out of a budget currently of $1.27 trillion. And therefore, a percentage of only 1.8% of the total budget to do with all these things that we think are important to help Jamaican people move forward, to help our children get a better education, to allow farmers to progress, to allow businesses to be formed and to get going, to help to drive the economy, better energy policy, etc., etc. But there are some other things in our proposals which are important and that we will speak to. As I've said, there's $360 billion of discretionary expenditure in the coming year's budget. The percentage reallocation of discretionary expenditure to fund the proposals that we have put forward is just 6.4%. And as I've said, even if you look at their projections, there's $36 billion of funding in expenditure when if you gross up this coming year's expenditure other than the interest for inflation, applying the 5% projection, what you get is they're projecting additional expenditure over that of $36 billion, and we're talking about $23 billion plus the NHT, $34 billion. So there we go. And of course, the $11.4 billion is already in the budget for the current year and wouldn't have to be funded for the current year, the removal of it. But thereafter, it will have to be funded. Next slide.
Before we go to the next slide, ladies and gentlemen, let me just indulge the evidence. Of course. Let me just indulge the evidence, alright? Oh no, I'll have to go to his history. Because I just pulled it up. Ooh. I just have it right here. Oh, I know why problem. Switch to this account. Bolo Bvrclips. Here we go. Timestamp 128. Boom. Let's examine this, ladies and gentlemen. This is the moment that Fayval Williams lied to the people of Jamaica. Listen to this. One of the lies, one of the big lies.
The spokesman on finance said that they would pay back the asset tax that is levied on the financial sector in 5 payments. So first, Madam Speaker, the spokesman on finance would have to stop taking the asset tax before he can start paying back for what was taken. Otherwise, he would never finish paying back.
Hear the dunce them a laugh. One bag of dunce. Hear the dunce them.
Embarrassing.
Hear the dunce.
He needs some milk.
Julian is not objecting.
And members.
A point of order. The member for South East St. Andrew said nothing about giving back asset tax. He talked about phasing out the tax over 5 years, not giving back the revenue already collected in 1 year. The minister is again misleading the House, and she must stop doing it. On securitization, I never said that securitization is in itself wrong. I said the use of the proceeds to fund the recurrent budget, using future revenue to meet today's expenses is what is wrong. And she's again misrepresenting the position.
So, Leader of the Opposition, members, please, Leader of the Opposition, I hope you will appreciate that this is not a cross debate. And members, I am ruling, and the ruling stands. So, Opposition Leader, you have been allowed the leeway to rise on a point of order twice to offer some clarification to what was said. Members.
Not even gonna further. Not even gonna further with them. Let's continue.
Next slide, please. Okay, so the current year, the removal of it, but thereafter, it will have to be funded. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I've said earlier, we will deal with the NHT revenue that we'll be giving up by giving up the 11.4 billion out of the incremental growth of revenues that is projected in the fiscal policy paper itself, $240 billion of additional revenue with no new tax measures over the next 4 years. Thank you. Next slide. We have some other proposals that we want to speak to. So as Julian in his presentation said that we want to have a special deal for our senior citizens when it comes to their water rate. We want to provide them with a flat rate. How do we do that? Simply put, we will look at their past consumption, we will average the last 3 years, and as long as it appears normal and that there were no leaks and so on, we will work out what their average consumption has been. We'll apply the normal rate to that and then give them a discount, and that will be their flat rate. And we will monitor that as we go along to make sure it achieves our policy objective. Next item is the matching grant to businesses for training. That will be funded out of the HART NSTA, which is a strong body that gets On every month, it gets flows coming in from employers, contributing to it. So it has solid resources and it can afford to do this matching program out of its resources without being a charge on the budget. The employment tax credit. This is an important thing because this is an incentive for employers to bring persons who are on contract work, informal forms of employment, which is an abusive measure as used by some employers, not all. We want to encourage them to bring those workers into formal employment so the workers get their full range of benefits that were hard won in the past, and many of those benefits were created for them by the People's National Party, and we want them to enjoy those benefits. So the employment tax credit, we're proposing to move that from 30%, which is where it was when we introduced it back in the last PNP government, to 40%. We anticipate that to be a revenue positive measure, not a cost to the budget. Next slide, please, and I'll explain why. First of all, it will boost tax compliance by companies, which has been the experience so far with the ETC, the employment tax credit. And by formalizing employment, it will also bring more employee-related revenue to the government. When the ETC was introduced 10 years ago, a significant growth in corporate taxes were experienced as a result of that tax incentive. It's one of the things that from time to time one has to point out, that actually a properly designed tax incentive can in fact increase revenue by changing behavior in ways that generate more revenue. And we anticipate that that will be the case with this ETC measure. And we want to give the employers this incentive because we want to regularize employment across Jamaica. So we don't have so many of workers in Jamaica not getting the benefits that are intended for them, leave with pay, etc., etc. And the other one, of course, is the deposit fund for young people up to 35 years old who want to buy a house but can't afford a deposit. The $1 billion that's allocated for that, so they can get grants towards their deposits of up to $500,000. And that will be funded out of the NHT itself. That will not be a charge on the budget. And of course, by discontinuing the extraction of resources from the NHT of $11.4 billion a year, the NHT will have significantly additional resources to do all the various things that we have in mind for the NHT, many of which I pointed out in my budget presentation. That's it, I think.
I want to say something about DBJ.
Yes, and then I have some closing remarks.
The minister announced yesterday that the DBJ would review and reform the way it provides loans to the MSME sector. Now, we made a commitment that we would back end all of the fees that MSMEs have been required to pay upfront. For example, if you're taking out a $10 million loan, MSMEs were required to pay $500,000 upfront. That was an inhibitor to persons accessing financing. Now, 9 years into the tenure of this government, just a simple adjustment. And what does that say? Have they been listening to the business sector for 9 years? The MSME sector has been calling for this adjustment. It costs the government nothing. You know how many times we sit at standing finance and we see monies that have been sent to the DBJ coming back unused because people can't access it because of the onerous conditions. So belatedly, after pressure from our commitment and from the sector, 9 years later, this government has decided to make this adjustment. Is 9 years too late?
Embarrassing. We need some milk.
For them, leave with pay, etc., etc. And the other one, of course, is the deposit fund for young people up to 35 years old who want to buy a house but can't afford a deposit. The $1 billion that's allocated for that, so they can get grants towards their deposits of up to $500,000. And that will be funded out of the NHT itself. That will not be a charge on the budget. And of course, by discontinuing the extraction of resources from the NHT of $11.4 billion a year, the NHT will have significantly additional resources to do all the various things that we have in mind for the NHT, many of which I pointed out in my budget presentation. That's it, I think.
I want to say something about DBJ.
Yes, and then I have some closing remarks.
The minister announced yesterday that the DBJ would review and reform the way it provides loans